I've told this story maybe 40 times now. Younglings ask me for it at the feeding halls. Officers who outrank me ask for it too, though they pretend they're only passing by. Even the ones who were there, who saw it with their own eyes, same as me, they still want to hear me say it out loud. Like they need someone else to confirm it happened. Like they can't trust their own memory of it. I understand that feeling, because for a long time I didn't trust mine either. My name is Vashka Dro, I'm Wren. If you've never met one of my kind, picture something built like a wall that learned to walk. We're heavy worlders. We grow up under a sky that presses down on you, in a gravity that would flatten most of the delicate species in the coalition. My people don't brag about strength. We don't need to. You look at us, and you already know. A Wren cadet can lift a loading sledge over their head at 12 cycles old. By the time we're grown, we can crack a boarding hatch with our hands if the mechanism jams. So when I tell you that I once watched a small, soft, thin-boned human girl take everything I thought I knew about strength and quietly set it on fire, you should understand how much that cost me to admit. Let me take you back. The station was called Threshold 9. Officially, it was a coalition proving ground, but nobody called it that. Everyone just called it the Bastion. It hung in the dark between two dead stars, a great gray ring of a place, all riveted metal and long echoing corridors that always smelled faintly of ozone and old sweat. It never got warm. The heaters worked, but the cold got into the bones of the place somehow, and it never really left. The Bastion existed for one reason. Every species that wanted a seat at the Coalition's military table sent their best young ones there. You trained, you sparred, you bled a little, and at the end of a cycle you fought in the trials, a tournament more or less, though we didn't use that soft a word. The trials decided ranking. Ranking decided everything. Your species standing, your posting, your future. I was there as a second cycle cadet, already halfway to a good posting, already used to winning. And that year, for the first time, the humans came. You have to understand what a strange thing that was. Humanity had only joined the coalition a handful of cycles earlier. Most of us had never seen one in the flesh. We'd heard the reports, of course. Small species, fragile, came from a middling world, decent gravity but nothing punishing. No natural armor, no claws worth the name, no venom, no shell. Bones that snapped. Skin you could open with a fingernail. On paper, humans were almost a joke. A species that should have died out 100 times over and somehow just didn't. There were 4 of them assigned to the Bastion that cycle, 3 men and a girl. The girl was called Wren. I remember the first time I saw her because I almost didn't. That's how easy she was to miss. We were in the intake hall, the big cold room where new cadets got processed and sorted. I was near the front, because Wren are always near the front. And I heard the humans before I saw them, that quick, chattering, warm sound their language makes like water over stones. I turned to look. 3 of the men were built solid enough for their kind. Broad, scarred, the sort of soldiers you could imagine surviving a hard world. And then there was Wren. She barely came up to my chest, thin as a signal wire, hair the color of dark copper pulled back tight. She had these pale gray eyes that seemed too big for the rest of her, and she kept them low, watching the floor, watching everyone's feet. She didn't stand like the men did, chin up, chest out, daring the room to test them. She stood the way a small animal stands in a big open space, still, ready, watching for the thing that's going to come for it. Next to her in the intake line was a Carthan. Now the Carth, those you'd have noticed. Warrior species, old and proud and mean about it. Tall, muscled, hide like gray stone, a bony crest that ran back over the skull. They'd been coming to the Bastion for generations, and they had never once placed below 3rd in the trials. They walked like they owned the floor, and honestly, most cycles they did. The Carthan in line looked down at Wren the way you'd look at something that got tracked in on your boot. He said something, I didn't catch it, my translator was still syncing, but I caught the laugh that came after. That laugh needs no translation in any language. It's the same everywhere. Big creature, small creature, look how small. Wren didn't look up, didn't react, just kept watching the floor. I remember thinking, that one won't last the cycle. I remember thinking it with no cruelty at all. Just the flat certainty of a heavy worlder looking at a light-boned thing and doing the math. She'll break. It's only a question of when. I'm not proud of how sure I was. The first 2 weeks proved me right, or seemed to. They ran us through the standard entry drills: endurance, load-bearing, close quarters grappling, weapons familiarity. And Wren was, by every measure they put in front of her, the weakest cadet on the entire station. The load drills were the worst to watch. We had to carry a graded weight across the long hall and back, cycle after cycle, until you dropped. The Carthans threw the max weight over one shoulder and jogged. I did it without much trouble. Even the smaller species managed the middle grades. Wren couldn't lift the lowest grade off the rack. I watched her try. She got her arms under it, set her feet, and pulled, and her whole body shook with the effort, and the thing didn't move. She tried again. Her face went red, then a strange white, and a vein stood out on her thin neck, and still it didn't move. The drill instructor, a Vorn with no patience for anyone, finally just waved her off in disgust. Half the hall was laughing by then. Not cruel laughing, most of it. Just the easy laughter of the strong watching the weak fail at the one thing that's supposed to matter. Wren walked back to the wall and sat down and drank her water and said nothing. The grappling was worse. They'd pair us off and let us wrestle to a pin. Wren got paired with a Carthan cadet, not the champion, just an ordinary one, and it lasted about 3 heartbeats. He picked her up like a bundle of rags and put her on the mat so hard the floor rang. She got up. He put her down again. She got up. He put her down a third time and held her there, and leaned close, and said something into the side of her head. And she just lay there under his weight with her cheek against the cold mat and those big gray eyes open, staring at nothing. And here's the thing that I noticed, even then, even when I'd already written her off. She never stopped getting up. Not once in 2 weeks did I see Wren stay down. They'd throw her, drop her, humiliate her, and every single time, slow, shaking, sometimes with blood on her lip, she got back to her feet. She didn't cry about it. She didn't rage about it. She'd just stand up, wipe her mouth, and reset her stance like the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. Over and over and over. At the time I thought it was stubbornness. The dumb, animal refusal of a creature too simple to know when it's beaten. I know better now. It wasn't stubbornness, it was study. The Carthan champion was named Sarek. They called him Sarek Red Hand, and by the time I got to the bastion the name was already halfway to a legend. 3 cycles undefeated. Not one loss. Not one draw. He put 4 cadets in the medical bay across his career and crippled one of them for good, a Drael cadet who'd made the mistake of taunting him before a match. Sarek didn't taunt back. He just made sure the Drael never taunted anyone again. He was enormous even for a Carthan. Half a head taller than the rest, hide gone almost black across the shoulders with age and scarring, the crest on his skull grooved with old fight marks. His eyes were this flat orange, and they never seemed to blink at the right times. When Sarek looked at you, you got the distinct sense he was deciding where the joints were. He ran the Carthan cadets like a warlord. They trailed after him in a pack. And Sarek had a game he liked to play, a cruelty he'd refined over 3 cycles. Every new intake, he'd pick the weakest cadet on the station and he'd make an example of them. Break them early. Break them in front of everyone. It set the tone. It reminded the whole bastion where the top of the ladder was and who was standing on it. You already know who he picked that cycle. The first time Sarek noticed Wren, it was in the mess hall. She was sitting alone. The human men kept to themselves and to their own drills, and Wren, for whatever reason, didn't sit with them. She had her tray in front of her and she was eating slowly, methodically. Watching the room the way she always watched the room. Sarek walked up behind her. The whole hall went quiet in that way a hall goes quiet, everyone pretending not to look while looking. He reached over her shoulder and picked up her water cup and poured it out on the floor. Slow, deliberate, watching her the whole time. Wren didn't turn around. She looked at the empty cup where his hand had put it back down. Then she picked it up, stood, walked to the dispenser, refilled it, came back, sat down, and kept eating. She never once looked at his face. Sarek stood there for a moment. I think he'd expected fear or anger or tears, some reaction he could feed on. He got nothing. Just the top of a copper-haired head and a small human quietly refusing to give him the thing he'd come for. He said something in Carthan, low, and the pack laughed. Then he walked off. But I watched his face as he went, and it wasn't a satisfied face. It was the face of a predator that had swiped at something and felt its claws close on empty air. I remember I sat there with my own meal going cold and thought, for the first time, what is she doing? Because she was doing something. I was sure of it now. 2 weeks of watching her fail, and I'd finally caught the thing underneath the failing. Every throw, every pin, every humiliation, she wasn't just enduring it. She was collecting it, filing it away. Behind those two big gray eyes something was working, patient and cold, and none of us could see what. Let me tell you about the thing that changed how I saw her. This is the part almost nobody knows, because almost nobody was there. The Bastion never fully slept. There were always cadets who couldn't rest or who trained on the off shift to escape the crowds. I was one of them. Heavy worlders don't need much sleep, and I liked the empty halls, the quiet, the machines humming to themselves in the dark. One off shift, deep in the sleep cycle, I couldn't settle, so I went walking, and I passed the smaller training annex, a side room they used for weapons drills, mostly ignored, and I heard something inside. A rhythmic sound, thud, 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 thud. I stopped at the doorway and looked in. Wren was in there, alone. She'd rigged a training dummy, one of the old ones, heavy synthetic, meant to simulate a large opponent, and she was hitting it. But not the way we were taught, not the way any of us fought. We were taught power, overwhelm, meet force with greater force. That's how it works when you're big. Wren wasn't hitting the dummy with power. She didn't have any to hit with. She was hitting it with precision. I watched her and I understood I was seeing something I wasn't meant to see. She'd move in quick, low, that small body suddenly not looking small at all but coiled, economical, and she'd strike a single point, just below the dummy's shoulder joint. Again, the same exact point. Then the side of the knee, the same exact spot. Then a place low on the back of the leg where on a living thing a big tendon runs. She wasn't trying to knock the dummy down. She was mapping it, finding the seams. The places where even something huge comes apart if you know precisely where to push. And she was talking to herself while she did it, low under her breath in her water-over-stones language, counting, I think, or reminding herself of something, over and over. She did this for what must have been 2 full hours. When she finally stopped, she was soaked in sweat and shaking with exhaustion, and she sat down against the wall and put her head back and closed her eyes, and I saw her lips still moving, still counting, still studying, even with her eyes shut. I backed away from the door before she could see me, and I walked the cold halls for a long time after that, turning it over. I'd thought she was the weakest fighter on the station, and by our rules, by strength, by mass, by everything my people had ever taught me to measure, she was. But I just watched her spend 2 hours in the dark, alone, doing the one thing none of the strong ones ever bothered to do. She was learning us, all of us. Every species on that station, every fighting style, every big proud creature who'd thrown her on the mat. She wasn't enduring the beatings. She was taking notes with her own body, learning exactly how each of us moved and where each of us was weak, and how a small thing might undo a large one if it never, ever wasted a single motion. I didn't sleep at all that off shift. I just sat with the strangest feeling I'd ever had. A cold, uneasy respect for a creature I'd been laughing at 2 weeks before. The trials came at the end of the cycle, and the way the trials worked, you didn't get to pick your matches. A lottery paired you. It was supposed to be fair, supposed to be random. But Sarek Redhand ran the Carthan side of the Bastion, and the Carthans had run the Bastion for 3 cycles, and there were arrangements. Everyone knew it and nobody said it. Sarek could get the pairing he wanted, and Sarek wanted Wren. He'd spent the whole cycle failing to break her the easy way, the taunts, the humiliations, the water poured on the floor. She'd given him nothing every time, and a creature like Sarek can't stand that. He decided he was going to break her properly in front of the whole station in the arena, where the rules would let him do it and call it sport. The pairing came out 2 days before the trials. It was posted on the big board in the main hall, and a crowd gathered to read it, and I pushed my way to the front because I already knew what I'd see. Sarek Redhand versus Wren. The undefeated champion of 3 cycles, the one who'd crippled a cadet for a taunt, against the smallest, weakest fighter anyone at the Bastion had ever seen, a creature who, on day 1, couldn't lift the lowest weight off the rack. The hall reacted the way you'd expect. Some laughed. Some went quiet in the uncomfortable way you go quiet when you realize you're about to watch something ugly. The Carthans grinned and clapped Sarek on the back. A couple of the kinder species, a Elani cadet I knew, gentle people, actually went to the instructors and asked if the match could be stopped, asked if it was safe. The instructors said the trials were the trials. No exceptions. No mercy rule. If a cadet stepped into the ring, they'd agreed to whatever came. I was near the board when Wren came to read the pairing. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, out of that awful pity you give something that's already dead and doesn't know it yet. She walked up to the board, small and copper-haired and quiet, and she read her name, and she read the name across from it. And here's what I saw. I was close. I saw it clearly. She didn't flinch. She didn't pale. Those big gray eyes went across the board and settled on the name Sarek Redhand, and something moved behind them. Not fear. Recognition. Like she'd been waiting for exactly this. Like of every fighter on that station, Sarek was the one she'd been studying hardest, the one she'd mapped most carefully in the dark of that empty annex. And now the lottery, or Sarek's own arrogance, had handed him to her. She turned and walked away without a word. And I swear to you, though I couldn't see her face anymore, I could tell from the set of her thin shoulders that she wasn't walking away like the condemned. She was walking away like someone who'd just been handed the exact thing she wanted. The night before the trials, I did something I'd never done before. Something a Wren cadet, proud, undefeated, was not supposed to do. I went to find her. I told myself I didn't know why. That's a lie I can admit to now. I knew why. I'd spent a whole cycle watching a small, soft creature refuse to break, and I'd watched her train alone in the dark with a discipline that shamed me, and I could not stand the thought of walking into that arena tomorrow and watching Sarek Redhand take her apart for sport. It sat wrong in me. It sat wrong in a place I didn't have a name for yet. I found her in the annex, of course, same as always, alone with the dummy. She heard me come in, she heard everything I'd learned, and she stopped and turned. And for the first time in the whole cycle, those gray eyes looked directly at me, held mine. She wasn't afraid of me either. A creature a third my size, and she looked at me like an equal, deciding whether I was worth her time. "Wren," she said, her translator caught it. "You've been watching me." I hadn't expected that. "Yes," I said, no point lying to those eyes. Since the annex, not a question, she'd known. That first off shift, 2 hours in the dark, she'd known I was in the doorway the whole time. She'd let me watch anyway. I didn't know what to say, so I said the true thing. "You're going to fight Sarek tomorrow." "I know. He's undefeated, 3 cycles. He crippled a cadet for less than what you've—" I stopped. "You can't beat him with strength. You don't have any. I've watched you all cycle. You couldn't lift the lowest weight on day 1. And Wren did something then that I have never forgotten. She smiled, just a little. A small, tired, human smile at the corner of her mouth. "You still think it's about strength," she said. "All of you, the whole station. A whole galaxy full of big, strong things, and every single one of you thinks the fight is decided by who can lift the most." She shook her head, slow. "Where I come from, Wren, we're the weakest thing in the room. Always. Every predator on my world is faster than us, or stronger, or has better teeth. We should have died out 100 times over. But you didn't, I said. It came out quieter than I meant. No, she turned back to the dummy, set her stance. We didn't. You want to know how a weak thing survives in a world full of strong things? It doesn't get stronger, it can't, it never can. She struck the dummy, that single, precise point below the shoulder, the one I'd seen her hit 1,000 times. It gets smarter, it watches, it waits. It learns exactly how the strong thing moves, and exactly where the strong thing is weak, and it spends every single day the strong thing is showing off learning. She struck again, the knee, the tendon, the seam. Sarek's been fighting the same way for 3 cycles, she said. Same opening, same power throw off his right side, same overhand when he's angry, and he's always angry. He's never had to change because he's never lost. He's never lost because nobody ever studied him. They just walked in and traded strength with him, and he had more, so they lost. She stopped, looked at me again. I've been studying him since the day he poured my water on the floor. He handed me 3 cycles of habits and thought he was being cruel. I stood there in that cold annex, and I felt something turn over in my chest, something old and heavy that I'd carried my whole life without knowing it was there. The certainty, the heavy worlder's certainty that strength was the first and last thing, that the big thing always beat the small thing, that the math was the math. And this small copper-haired creature had just taken that certainty and shown me the hole in the middle of it. You're not the weakest fighter here, I said. She picked up her water, the same kind of cup Sarek had emptied on the floor, and drank, and looked at me over the rim with those big gray eyes. No, she said, I'm the only one who bothered to be dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think anyone did. The whole bastion had turned into something electric and ugly. The Carthans were loud, celebrating already, betting on how many heartbeats it would take Sarek to end it. Someone started a pool. The high number was a quarter cycle of a minute. The low number was 10 heartbeats. Nobody bet on Wren. Not one cadet on the entire station put a single mark on the human girl. Except me. I found the Carthan running the pool, and I put down my entire cycle's rations allowance, and I said, Wren, to win. He laughed so hard he nearly fell over. The human, to win. He wrote it down like he was writing down a joke. Thren's gone soft, big gray rock gone soft over a walking twig. The other Carthans howled. You want to just hand me the marks now, save us the trouble. I let them laugh. I'd stopped caring what the strong thought was funny. Because I'd seen her in the dark, 2 hours a night, every night, for a whole cycle. I'd heard her explain it in that cold annex with a small, tired smile. And somewhere in the long, sleepless dark before the trials, I'd stopped seeing a weak thing that was going to break. I'd started seeing what Sarek Redhand couldn't see, because he'd never once been forced to look. He thought he was walking into that arena to make an example of the weakest fighter on the station. He had no idea he was walking into the one fight in 3 cycles that someone had actually prepared for. The morning of the trials, the arena filled to the walls. The morning of the trials, the arena filled to the walls. I'd seen it full before, every cycle it filled. But this was different. This was the kind of full where the air itself feels heavier, where you can smell the crowd, the sweat of a dozen species, the sharp chemical tang of the Vorn, the wet earth smell of the Elani, all of it pressed together under those cold gray lights. The arena at the bastion was a great circular pit, sunk down into the floor, ringed by tiers of benches that climbed up and up into the dark. In the center, a raised platform of dull metal, worn smooth in the middle from 100 cycles of fights. They called it the ring, though it was square. Nobody at the bastion ever named a thing correctly. I got there early and took a place low, close to the platform. I wanted to see. Whatever was going to happen, I wanted to see all of it, with nothing between me and the truth of it. The undercard matches came first. The lesser pairings, I barely watched them. 2 Vorn traded blows until one stopped getting up. Adrael outlasted an Elani in a grappling match that went long and dull. The crowd cheered when it was supposed to and got bored when it was supposed to, and the whole time you could feel it, that low current running under everything, everyone waiting for the main event. The joke, the slaughter, the human girl and the champion. Then they cleared the platform, and the announcer's voice came over the arena, huge and flat, and named the two who'd fight last. Sarek Redhand and Wren. The sound the crowd made was not a cheer. It was uglier than a cheer. It was the sound a crowd makes when it thinks it's about to watch something die and has decided to enjoy it. Sarek came out first because of course he did. He came out of the fighter's tunnel with his pack behind him, and he walked slow, letting them see him, letting the sound wash over him. He'd oiled his hide until the black shoulders gleamed under the lights. The old fight grooves in his crest caught the glow. He climbed onto the platform in one easy motion, all that mass, moving like it weighed nothing, and he raised both arms, and the Carthan side of the arena roared like a machine coming to life. He looked, I have to be honest, like exactly what he was, the strongest thing in the room, 3 cycles of proof standing there in the flesh, undefeated, unbroken, certain. When Sarek turned in a slow circle with his arms up, you could feel the whole arena agreeing with him. Yes, you're the biggest. Yes, you always win. Yes, this is how it works. And then Wren came out. She came out of the tunnel alone. No pack. The 3 human men were somewhere in the crowd, but they didn't walk her out. I found out later she'd asked them not to. She wanted to walk out alone, so she did. She looked so small on that long walk to the platform, smaller than ever with all that space around her and all those eyes on her. Copper hair pulled back tight, plain training gear, those thin arms that couldn't lift the lowest weight on the rack. She walked through a sea of noise, laughter, jeering, that awful anticipatory hunger, and she didn't hurry and she didn't slow. She just walked, watching the platform the way she watched everything, low and steady and calculating. She climbed up onto the metal. It took her a real effort, a little hop and a pull, where Sarek had flowed up like water. The Carthans laughed at that too, at the little human who had to work to climb onto the platform where she was going to be killed. She stood across from Sarek Redhand, and the top of her head reached about the middle of his chest, and the size of the thing was so absurd that even some of the neutral cadets laughed. It looked less like a match than a mistake, like someone had made an error in the pairings and put a child in with a war beast. Sarek looked down at her, that flat orange gaze unblinking. He said something, the translators caught it and threw it up across the arena feed, big letters in a dozen scripts. I'll try to make it quick, but I won't promise. The crowd loved that. The crowd ate that up. Wren looked up at him, and she said one thing back. Just one. Quiet, but the platform mics caught it, and it went up on the feed too, and I watched it land across the whole arena. You fought the same fight for 3 years. I only had to learn it once. Sarek didn't understand it. You could see he didn't. He heard the words and they slid off him like water off oiled hide because they didn't fit anything he knew. In his world, the small thing didn't talk back with riddles. The small thing begged or froze or swung wild and got broken. This calm, this certainty from a creature a third his size, it didn't compute. His crest shifted just slightly. Annoyance. The first crack of something that wasn't total confidence. He didn't know it yet, but she'd already started the fight. And that first strike had landed clean. The bell rang. I'm going to tell you what happened as carefully as I can, because the whole arena saw it and half the arena still got it wrong, and I don't want you to get it wrong. Sarek came off his mark exactly the way I'd been told he would. Exactly the way Wren had described in the cold annex the night before. He led with the power throw off his right side, his signature, the opening move that had ended more matches than any single technique in 3 cycles. He closed the distance in one huge stride, that heavy right arm sweeping in to catch her, to grab and lift and slam, the way he'd done to a dozen cadets before her. It was fast. For something that big, it was terrifyingly fast. Wren was faster, but not the way you'd think. She didn't dart away. She didn't dodge back like prey. She stepped in, toward him, under the sweep of that arm, into the space he'd left open by committing to the throw, the space he'd left open every single time for 3 cycles, because nobody had ever been small enough and fast enough and prepared enough to be there. And she struck the point below his shoulder. The exact point. The one I'd watched her hit 1,000 times on the dummy in the dark. It didn't look like much. That's the thing. There was no great impact, no crash, no roar. Just a small copper-haired creature slipping under a giant's arm and touching one precise place with the heel of her hand and the full driving weight of her whole small body behind it, timed to the exact instant his own momentum was pulling that arm forward. Sorek's right arm stopped working. Not broken. Not yet. But something in that joint, some bundle of the things that let a limb do what a limb does, she'd found it and struck it. And for a critical moment the arm just hung there, dead weight, his own power throw collapsing around a limb that wouldn't finish the motion. The arena didn't understand what it had seen. There was a confused ripple of sound. Sorek stumbled, actually stumbled, the champion, undefeated for 3 cycles, as his own thrown weight carried him past the small thing that should have been in his grip and wasn't. And Wren was already gone, already circling, already resetting to that low, coiled, economical stance, those gray eyes never leaving him, watching what she'd done take effect. I was close. I heard the sound Sorek made. It wasn't pain. It was worse than pain for a creature like him. It was confusion. He turned on her, and now the crest was fully up, and the flat orange eyes had gone hot, and he came at her again. And this is where 3 cycles of never losing turned into a cage he couldn't climb out of. Because Sorek only knew how to fight one way, he'd never had to learn another. Why would he? When you win every time, the way you win becomes the only way that exists. So when the power throw failed him, he did the next thing in his sequence, the overhand smash, the one Wren had told me he always went to when he was angry. And he's always angry, she'd said. She'd known it was coming. Of course she'd known. She'd been watching him bring that overhand down on other cadets all cycle long. The huge arm, the left one now, the right still hanging half-dead, came down like a falling girder. If it had landed, it would have ended everything. It would have driven her through the platform. It didn't land. She wasn't there. She'd read the shift in his shoulders a full heartbeat before it started, and she'd already stepped off the line, and the smash came down on empty metal with a crash that rang through the whole arena and jarred up Sorek's own arm. And in the half-instant he was overextended, bent forward over his own missed blow, Wren struck again. The side of the knee, that exact spot, heel of the hand, whole body behind it, driving into the seam where even something huge comes apart. Sorek's leg buckled. He went down to one knee on the platform with a boom you could feel in the benches. And for one long, impossible moment, the champion of 3 cycles was kneeling in front of the smallest fighter on the station. The arena went dead silent. I want you to understand that silence because I have never heard another like it. Thousands of cadets, a dozen species, packed to the walls and not one sound. Not one. Because every single creature in that arena had just watched their entire understanding of the world take a knee on that metal platform. The big thing beats the small thing. That was the law. That was the math. And the law was down on one knee with a dead arm and a buckled leg, and the small thing was standing over it, breathing slow, not even marked. Somewhere in that silence, I realized I was on my feet. I don't remember standing. Sorek roared. It was a terrible sound, rage and disbelief, and something underneath both of those that I don't think Sorek Redhand had felt in 3 cycles, maybe not in his whole life. Fear. Not fear of losing. Fear of not understanding. He was a creature who had never once in his life met a problem he couldn't solve by being bigger, and now here it was, a small copper-haired problem that got bigger every time he got angrier, and he had no idea what to do except the thing he'd always done. Be more. Hit harder, overwhelm. He surged up off his knee, even wounded, even with the arm and the leg, The raw power of him was staggering, and he threw everything he had left into one last berserk rush. No technique now, no signature move, just a wall of enraged Carthan muscle trying to catch the small thing and crush it against the platform by sheer mass, the way instinct screamed at him too. And Wren let him come. That's the part I'll never forget. She didn't flinch from it. She didn't run. She'd been waiting for exactly this, for the moment his discipline broke completely, and he came at her wild and blind and off balance, all that mass moving forward with nothing behind the eyes but rage. She'd told me in the annex, a weak thing survives by learning exactly how the strong thing moves, and exactly where the strong thing is weak. And an enraged giant charging in a straight line is, it turns out, the most predictable thing in the galaxy. She dropped low, under the reaching arms, and as the whole thundering mass of Sarek Redhand rushed over her, she struck the last point, the one low on the back of the leg, the great tendon, heel of the hand, whole body, every ounce of that small furious frame driven up into a single point on a creature 10 times her weight, timed to the exact instant his full charging mass came down on that leg. The leg gave out completely. And Sarek Redhand, champion of 3 cycles, undefeated, unbroken, oiled and gleaming under the cold gray lights, went down. Not to a knee this time. All the way down. His own charging momentum, with the leg gone out from under him, drove him face first onto the platform with a crash that shook the tiers. He hit hard. So hard the whole arena felt it through the floor. And he did not get up. He tried. I'll give him that. He got the good arm under himself and he pushed, and his ruined leg wouldn't hold, and the dead arm wouldn't answer, and he collapsed back down onto the metal. He tried again. Same thing. The strongest creature I'd ever seen, and his own body had been taken away from him one precise joint at a time by something a third his size that had simply refused to fight him the way he wanted to be fought. Wren stood over him. Breathing hard now, finally she'd spent everything, you could see it, that small body running on the last of itself, but standing, not marked, not thrown, standing over the champion, looking down at him with those big gray eyes, and there was no cruelty in her face. That's what got me. After everything he'd done, the water on the floor, the taunts, I'll try to make it quick, she looked down at him with no triumph and no cruelty at all. She just looked tired, and a little sad, like she'd known all along it would end this way and had never once enjoyed the knowing. The referee, a Vorn, no patience, remember, stared at the fallen champion for a long moment, as if his own eyes couldn't be trusted. Then he raised his arm and pointed it at the small copper-haired figure standing on the platform. Wren, the winner. I've heard silence before. I've heard crowds roar. I had never, until that day, heard the exact sound a whole arena makes when its entire understanding of the world breaks at once. It started low, a single voice somewhere high in the tiers, then another. Then it spread and swelled and rose until the whole arena was on its feet and roaring, not the ugly, hungry sound from before, not the sound of a crowd waiting for a slaughter. This was something else. This was the sound of thousands of creatures who had just watched the impossible happen and needed, all at once, to make noise about it or burst. Even the Carthan stood. That's the thing I still can't fully explain. Even Sarek's own pack, the ones who'd bet on how many heartbeats it would take him to kill her, even they were on their feet. Some of them looked sick. Some looked furious. But some of them, a few, wore an expression I recognized because I'd worn it myself the night I watched her in the annex. That cold, unwilling, undeniable respect. The look of a strong thing that has just learned, too late, that it was never the most dangerous thing in the room. And down at the front, on my feet, roaring with the rest of them, was one gray, heavy-worlder Wren who'd bet his entire cycle's rations on a walking twig. I collected those marks, by the way. The Carthan running the pool didn't laugh when he paid me. He couldn't look at me at all. He just pressed the marks into my hand and turned away, and I let him. I didn't much care about the marks. I'd have paid triple, 10 times over, just to have been there. Just to have been low and close and watching with nothing between me and the truth of it, when the smallest fighter on the station took everything the galaxy believed about strength and quietly, precisely, took it apart one joint at a time. They took Sarek to the medical bay. The arm recovered mostly. The leg took longer. He never fought at the Bastion again, not because he couldn't, but because something in him had been broken that the medics couldn't set. The certainty. The thing that had made him Sarek Red Hand. She'd struck that too, though it wasn't a point on any dummy. It was just there in the wreckage of everything he'd been sure of, and it never fully healed. I looked for him once near the end of the cycle to see how he was. I found him in a quiet corridor, alone, no pack anymore. They'd drifted off to follow someone still winning, and he was just standing there looking at his own right hand, opening and closing it slowly, testing it, making sure it still worked. He saw me and he didn't sneer. That surprised me. He just looked at me, this hollowed-out version of the champion, and after a moment he said one thing. She never even tried to hurt me. You saw it, she could have. At the end, she could have finished it however she wanted. He closed the hand into a fist and opened it again. She only took what she needed to win, nothing more. He shook his head slow, the old fight grooves in his crest catching the corridor light. In 3 cycles, I never once fought like that. I never once had to. She fought better than me because she'd been weaker than me her whole life. Do you understand that, Wren? She was better because she was weak. I did understand it. I'd been understanding it for a while by then. But I didn't say so. I just left him there in the cold corridor, opening and closing his hand, learning the lesson 3 cycles too late. I found Wren one more time before the cycle ended. Back in the annex, of course. Where else? Alone with the dummy, hitting the same precise points, still studying, even now, even as champion. Because that was simply who she was. A small, dangerous thing that never stopped learning even when it had nothing left to prove. She heard me come in, turned, those gray eyes. You bet on me, she said. Not a question, she'd heard. Of course she'd heard. Everything I had, I said. The corner of her mouth went up, that small, tired human smile. Why? And I told her the truth, because those eyes had never let me tell her anything else. Because I watched you in the dark, I said. 2 hours a night for a whole cycle, alone, nobody making you, everyone laughing at you, and you just kept learning. I paused. It was hard to say for a heavy worlder. My whole life I thought strength was the first thing and the last thing, that the big thing always beats the small thing, that the math was the math. I looked at her, this creature a third my size who taught me otherwise on a metal platform in front of the whole station. You showed me the hole in the middle of it. I bet everything on you because you were the only one who bothered to be dangerous. And I wanted, I don't know. I wanted to be on the right side of that, even once, even if I was the only one. Wren was quiet for a moment. Then she set down her water, the same kind of cup Sarek had once emptied on the floor, and she looked at me, really looked, the way you look at someone you've decided to let all the way in. Where I come from, she said, we've got a saying about my kind, about humans. The other species out here, they think we're a joke, soft, fragile, weakest thing in the room. She picked the dummy's point again, that spot below the shoulder, and rested her hand on it without striking. But we came up on a world that tried to kill us every single day, with nothing, no armor, no claws, no venom, no size. Nothing but the one thing that turned out to matter more than all of it. She looked back at me. We paid attention. When you're the weakest thing in the room, you learn to pay attention or you die. And we didn't die. She dropped her hand from the dummy. Sarek was the strongest fighter on this station, she said. He never had to pay attention to anything in his life. That's not strength, Wren. That's just a long, lucky streak that hasn't met the right small thing yet. I've carried that with me ever since. Through every posting, every cycle, every big proud creature I've watched swagger into a fight sure of the math. A long, lucky streak that hasn't met the right small thing yet. So that's the story. That's what I saw, low and close, with nothing between me and the truth of it. The younglings always ask me the same question at the end. They ask how she did it. How the weakest fighter on the whole station beat the champion of 3 cycles. And I know what they want. They want a technique. a secret move, some trick they can practice on a dummy in the dark until they've got it too. But that was never the secret. The move was just a move. Anyone could have thrown it if they'd known where and when. The secret was that while every strong thing on that station was busy being strong, showing off, winning easy, never once forced to look closer, one small copper-haired creature who couldn't lift the lowest weight on the rack was watching all of them, learning all of them, paying the kind of attention that only the weakest thing in the room ever learns to pay. She wasn't the weakest fighter on the bastion. We only thought she was because we were measuring the wrong thing. She was the most dangerous fighter I have ever seen. And she got that way for the oldest reason in the galaxy. The same reason her whole strange, soft, fragile, unkillable species claws its way up every ranking it enters and refuses, generation after generation, to know when it's beaten. Because a weak thing that pays attention will always, in the end, undo a strong thing that never had to. Never forget that, younglings. Never once forget it. The galaxy is full of Sarex, big and sure and undefeated, riding a lucky streak they've mistaken for a law. And somewhere in the room, small and quiet, and watching your every move, there's always a Wren.